Oh no! It's just come on. Hello guys, and welcome to this Volks Wizard video. Now some of you may recall that last year I did a review of the Mk7.5 Golf GTE that was entitled Why I Don't Hate the Golf GTE, and that was because it was better than I expected, but it still wasn't that brilliant. It wasn't a very good GTI because it didn't really have the power at 204 horsepower, and it felt quite a heavy car, and it wasn't a very good electric vehicle because it only had a very short range, probably roughly about 15 miles in real world use. So when I heard they were going to attend to those two things with the new Mk8 GTE, I thought I've got to have a go in one of these. So I've got one here from Inchcape Volkswagen Cheltenham once again, who are helping me out with a loan car. Apparently it's more of a GTI. It's certainly got GTI levels of power, so it's 245 PS now. That's quite an increase. That's with the electric motor and the petrol engine together. That's the same as the old GTI Performance, no less. And it's got pretty much double the range of the old car. I actually drove it from Cheltenham to Stratford upon Avon yesterday on a full charge. It did 31 miles. That's in the dark with the lights on. Yeah, so I was pretty impressed with that. That's roughly double of what I got out of the old one. We're going to find out later on if it's a much more of a GTI than the old one by giving it a test on some nice country roads. But today we're going to try and do my commute to work, which is what the old GTE could never do. I live 25 miles away from work. We put it on charge last night. It came back with zero range because Stratford's a few miles away from here. Within about 4 hours it had charged up, and we're just using a normal 3-pin plug in the wall. Hello TCR, have a nice holiday in here. So just a standard plug with the charger supplied, and it did the full charge. That was 3 to 4 hours to do 31 miles, which is half a day at work. So you can easily commute in theory on this up to about 30 miles. But we'll find out. Some of this journey is motorway, which isn't very good for electric vehicles because of all the drag. If I keep the speed down to 60 to 70, it should be okay, but I don't want to drive deliberately slowly just because I'm driving on electricity. The beauty of the GTE over, say, the ID3 is that when I get to work, if it's depleted and I get a phone call to go somewhere, I don't have to charge it. I can put some petrol in it, or there's already petrol in it, and just go wherever I want to, come back, charge it, and then drive home and back on electricity. So really it would be purely a commuter car on electricity, but I spend probably 50 to 60 quid a week on petrol driving not the most economical petrol car, but a car I like. So if I can like this car and commute on EV, then that would be having your cake and eating it. So anyway, without any further ado, let's go and do my commute and see if we can actually get to work on just electricity. Okay guys, welcome to the inside of the Golf GTE. We haven't actually started moving yet. I just want to take you through that process. So it's DSG, foot on the brake, the starter button's flashing a bit, glowing, and that bong means we're ready to go. No engine starting now. We've got 34 miles of range left. This car's actually WLTP tested at 32 miles range. That would be like a combined figure, including a bit of urban, bit of motorway maybe, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's reassuring. We've got more than we need then by 9. How will that pan out? At the bottom of the trip computer there, it says how far we've been, 0 miles. I have had the car with the ignition on for 5 minutes to just get set up, which probably used a little bit of electricity. So let's get going before we use even more. We're on 4 miles in, and it's already saying we've lost 7 miles, which is a bit unfortunate because we've not actually gone very fast, and we've mainly been going down a hill. But I'll forgive it if it sort of catches up a bit and we can get 25 miles, or at least the remaining 21 miles on what's left. Let's see what happens. It's a few miles now to the motorway. We'll catch up then. Okay, we're just approaching the motorway. We're 7 miles in now. We've got 23 miles range left, so it's pulled it back a little bit, but I don't have good feelings about motorway use in electric vehicles because yeah, it's not very efficient if you go above 60 miles an hour, and at 60 miles an hour you're kind of mixing it with all the lorries, which isn't particularly enjoyable on a busy motorway just before Christmas. Anyway, let's see what we can do. So 23 miles range, we've got 17 to go, so there's a 6 mile buffer. Right, see you at the end of the motorway bit. Okay, we've done 22 miles now. how much have we got left range? Just 2 miles. It's a bit of a shame really, because we've had some heavy rain, so the wipers have been on, the headlights have been on, but this is why you do a real world test. I'm pretty sure in more normal weather we could stretch it out a bit. It's a pity as well, because up until recently we had 2 miles in reserve, and then just recently it's sort of dropped quite a lot. Probably to do with having the wipers on high speed, maybe. But you never know, we've got a slower bit now. I'm just approaching my exit. I decided to do 70 on the motorway because doing 65 or less is just so dangerous with all the lorries. 70 is not ideal, but it's definitely better than having to overtake a lorry at like a few miles an hour more than their speed. So let's see how we get on then. So now we've slowed down a bit and we've done a bit of regenerative braking. We've got 2 miles range and 2 miles to go, so it's all to play for. Okay, well, it's dropped now to 0 miles. We've actually done 25 miles according to the computer, so it must be like the upper sort of 25 to 26 that I have to cover. So it's like 25.9. Well, there'll be variations between cars and stuff, exactly how much they're counting, but we've still got a rev counter on 0, so we're still on electric mode. Only one more hill and then we're there. Doing 34 in a 40. That's because it's raining, it's not because I'm teething. Oh no! It's just come on. This is how close we are. Oh well, let's put it into perspective. That was a pretty good showing, and that would have used sort of very little fuel just doing that. So yeah, I think it's a shame to fail so close, but we got so close. So yeah, well done GTE. I've got to do that again before the car goes back, doesn't I? All right, and next we're going to have a look at the car, have a closer look at it. I haven't done a walk around yet, and after we've done that we can go and see if it is a better GTI than the old GTE. Okay, let's start off then by talking about the price of the Golf GTE. So if you spec'd a 245 PS Golf GTI with DSG, that would be £35,000. This 245 PS GTE that only comes with DSG is £36,000, so exactly £1,000 more, which sounds like a bargain. Bearing in mind they give you an extra drivetrain for £1,000. You normally can't even buy a wheel from Volkswagen for £1,000. So yeah, I bet they're not making as much money on these cars. You don't get the government grant anymore on plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. That's something to consider. You would get that on an ID3, for example, which would be a similar price to this car and has a range significantly, massively more than this car on electric, but obviously it is pure electric. Let's now see what your money gets you with the GTE. Now this car is in Dolphin Grey, by the way. It's a metallic colour and it's 600 or so extra. Pure white is free, that looks really good. But as I said in the Club Sport video, silver is the colour for these, I think. Now, one unique feature we should start off with is the charging port. It's only on the passenger side for us in the UK. Funny enough, in Germany, this is the driver's side, which you could say is the best side to have it on. There isn't one on both sides like you get, say, on an Audi e-tron. In theory, you could drive away and not see you were plugged in, but luckily the car's cleverer than that and it won't let you do that, but it's still a bit of a pain having it on the wrong side. Okay, at the front it is very GTI, so we've got that gaping air intake there, which will no doubt lead to a lot of stone damage on those radiators. In fact, there is a bit of stone damage on there already, and it's done a couple of thousand miles, this car. We've got the light bar, which is a bit Marmite. We've got blue where it's red on the GTI, going into the headlights as well. You're probably not going to like these wheels. These are the 17-inch version of the ones on the GTI. They're the same style, they're just not diamond cut, and they're an inch smaller. They come with some very nice tyres though, Goodyear Eagle F1s, 225 45 17s. You can upgrade these wheels to a wheel called Bakersfield for £600, and they do look really good. 18s, black and diamond cut, and I don't think it should affect efficiency too much because it's still a 225 wide tyre. This is, did I say, the base wheel for the GTI in its home market. It makes the brakes look quite big though, because they fit in there quite snugly. And you get red calipers, which does brighten up a car no end. The side is GTI, there's not really a massive difference over the base car. I've got the chunky unpainted sill strip down there, lots of tint in the back windows. And we've got a sad lack of any sort of exhaust pipes at the back, which is a strange thing really, because it's got an engine, but they've given us sort of the fake tips of the sort of style model. That's a bit disappointing. But we do get the GTE badge, which as a lot of people think is in the wrong place, but we will get used to that. So yeah, that's pretty good. Right. Oh, and the spoiler is very GTI as well. Let's now have a look inside. So as on the outside, what is red on the GTI is blue in the GTE. So stitching, the fabric, the tartan there has got blue in it. Steering wheel, but in nearly every other respect it's GTI. So we've got the honeycomb there, which continues even in the Club Sports. It does look a little bit cheap down here, can't really put my finger on it, but that's a bit disappointing. At least we've got flock line door bins. We've got blue stitching on the carpets, mats there, stainless steel pedals. Yeah, it's very GTI. We've got the pseudo bucket seats as well, which are quite a nice thing to sit in. And they've got Alcantara on them, which is sort of an upgrade over the seats you've got in a 7.5 GTI, which were just cloth. So it's not all cost-cutting, people. But there is, of course, some cost-cutting. Now, unfortunately, we've got a red starter button there, but I guess that's fair. And if I press that, that bong means I could drive off now on electricity. There's a bit of residual in it, even though it says 0 on there. We've got a unique display on the active info display for GTE. There are many other modes you can go through if you want to, but I'm pretty sure you're going to set it once and just leave it, aren't you? So that's GTE, probably not the best one to read. If you want traditional dials, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, there you go. And you can configure what goes in between those dials, which is quite handy. I've set it up for the drive to work with range, so you could see that with the camera that was stuck on the piano black there, which is quite good for GoPros. Can't do that on most cars. We've got a unique display on here, so we've got e-displays which show you the range and the potential that you can save by turning things off, like the aircon. We've got energy flow, so when you're driving, electricity moves from the battery to the motor, and when you're recuperating, they call it, electricity, or regenerating electricity by braking, the electricity goes backwards. That's quite cool to watch, but you'll probably get bored of that pretty quickly, I think. I say recuperating because if you go into vehicle, tucked away deep in the menus is something quite important for GTE. So electric drive, here you can choose how much braking is done when you come off the gas. So if you go into high, when you come off the gas, the brakes are really sharp without you touching the brakes, and that's the generator harvesting the kinetic energy and sticking it back in the battery. That used to be done on the GTE with the shifter down there, but you kind of can't do that now. You've still got a sport mode, which you lost on the old ones. That's quite interesting. The old one had regeneration or drive. There's an auto mode though, which I think is probably cleverer than you and I. So it kind of knows that actually if you come off the gas, it's more efficient to just coast, to not use any power, just let momentum carry you along. So that's what auto mode does. But when you have to brake, it does do regeneration from the braking. So yeah, I quite like that. So it is all pretty much GTI. In here I've got that across the dash. We've got the full width air vents, which I quite like. Ambient lighting there in green and goes into the doors and at the back as well, which isn't always the case. So yeah, just watch the videos on the GTI and Mk8 style models I did earlier this year if you want to see more detail on the interior. Let's now, I think, skip to the boot, because the back seats are going to be the back seats, aren't they? They're no different on a GTE. But the boot is... So you get two cables, one for charging at home with a 3-pin plug, which is what I used. I think I said it took 4 hours. Officially it takes 5 hours to go from empty to full charge, which is just over 30 miles. But that's not too bad at all, bearing in mind it's just a normal plug socket. And that's the sort of the charging point away from home. or if you have one installed at home. Now under here, it's quite different. So we've got a much higher boot floor. There's no spare wheel well. You can't have a spare wheel, even if you want one. They made them optional on the other cars. Because down there, I believe that is where the fuel tank resides now. It's probably not the best place to have a fuel tank, because traditionally it's under the back seats. That's where the batteries are. So yeah, there is quite a compromise having a hybrid in that respect. And you have to store the cable somewhere as well, so that's, yeah, a bit of an issue. But you can fold the seats down just like any Golf, so it's got practicality in that respect. Now let's have a look under the bonnet on this very windy day. So down here we have a 1.4 TSI engine. It's quite an old engine, that, I think, style wise. Don't know if it's changed much over the old GTE, because that had a 1.4 as well. It's a shame they're not using the 1.5, because that's a really nice engine. And then down there between the DSG gearbox and the engine we have an electric motor, and that's what all this orange stuff is for. It's the cabling for that high voltage. So yeah, quite a bit different down there. Okay guys, well, now you've seen the GTE and how it almost looks like a GTI, let's find out if it almost drives like a GTI. Okay, here we are driving the Mk8 Golf GTE, and the first thing I want to point out is that there are two extra driving modes in this hybrid. You've got the usual Eco, Comfort, Sport and Individual, but we've got E-mode and hybrid mode. So E-mode will run purely on electricity if you've got it, and hybrid mode kind of mixes and matches petrol and electric to best effect. Now, if you put them together, you get 245 PS in this car. That's up from the 204 of the 7.5. That sounds like quite a big jump. What's really weird is that the engine's still 150 horsepower. That's the same as the 7.5. And the motor's only a little bit more powerful, not to the tune of 40, just like a handful of horsepower. So how they've made this 245 PS must be witchcraft, because it's the same basic ingredients. Maybe the way the two work together has changed, and that's why it's more powerful. There can be no other reason really. So it does 0 to 60 in 6.7, this does, and the GTI DSG does it in 6.3, so a little bit slower. It's about 10% heavier, about just over 1600 kilograms. The Golf's in somewhere in like the 1400 and a bit. So yeah, it's not a light car, but then you're carrying basically around two forms of propulsion, and it's quite a well-equipped car as well. Now the brakes are the same as a GTI, but there is, as is common with a lot of hybrids, a degree of inconsistency when you're braking, because we've got that automatic regeneration working in the background, and at certain speeds it just drops off like that, and the braking effect reduces, and they haven't really managed to integrate it particularly well. So there is a sensation of the car, as you brake, you're braking consistently on the pedal. Initially it brakes consistently, and then it doesn't. It kind of runs on a bit more than you expect it, which is a little bit disconcerting, but it doesn't do it all the time. It's really weird. It makes a decent noise. I'm not sure there's any fakery. We're in sport mode now. We haven't got exhaust at the back, but yeah, it's got kind of like an old school 4-cylinder growl to it. Nothing particularly inspiring. But how does it go around corners? Well, this is that corner that we tested the GTI on. And unlike the GTI, I don't think it's got a VAQ diff, because that was like a lot of yellow light down there. So you can't really have it all. You can't have a DSG and a motor and a VAQ diff. It would just be too complicated. This really is the biggest weakness of this car. So by giving it 245 PS and not the VAQ diff, it still isn't a Golf GTI. Don't get me wrong though, it's pretty quick. We've got 6-speed DSG, which is a bit of a throwback as well. Can we get past this tractor? We can! Yes! Yes, okay, it's still fun to drive, but no way is it as precise as a Mk8 GTI, which is an evolution of a 7 and a 7.5. and it feels heavy in these corners. Oh yeah, the suspension's definitely softer. It's got a lot of float, as you can tell by the ride height. It's got a lot of travel as well. It's definitely better than the 7.5, but there's no way it's anything like as exciting to drive as a modern GTI. Okay, well, how do I summarise the Mk8 Golf GTE? Well, it's clearly a better hybrid than the 7.5 GTE that came before it. It's got twice as much range, it handles a lot more like a GTI, but it's got one problem the 7.5 didn't have, and that's the ID3. Now, if I had an ID3, I could charge it here overnight. If I put a charging point in, it cost a few £100s. I could drive to and from work at whatever speed I wanted to, heated seats on, heated steering wheel on, and I'd have more than enough range for most of my driving. Okay, not many people do that kind of distance. The average journey is probably like 5 miles or something like that, and a GTE would do that quite easily on electric, but an ID3 would do that as well. Okay, long journeys might take a bit more planning, but it's not impossible. How many people really do that many journeys that are over 100 miles? Because that's the easy range of an ID3 driven fast, you know, and you could charge on the way. All that infrastructure is getting better. Another problem with the GTE is that, as well as not being a particularly good electric vehicle, it's not a GTI. If you want a hot hatch, go and buy the Mk8 GTI, or go and buy a TCR, which is similar sort of money. This is one of the best hot hatches you can buy, and it's similar money to this, and it's still quite efficient. Okay, a Mk8 GTI will be more efficient than a TCR. That'll do about 40 miles to the gallon, and it's still a much better drive than the GTE. Or you can do what I'm doing and wait for the hotter versions of the ID3 platform to come along, like the Cupra L-Ball, and that promises a brilliant combination of hot hatch and really good electric range. Once again, I'd like to thank Lee Evans at Inchcape Volkswagen Cheltenham for lending me this GTE, and once again I'd like to ask you to please share this video, comment, subscribe, and give it a thumbs up as well if you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you for the next one, hopefully very soon.